Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. This video is an album review on Soviet, the album called Endless from 2016. I first got wind of Soviet back in when they started, and they are an Italian post-punk band. Started in 2008, and right around 2010 they released their first album. Um, I'm gonna be reviewing their third album called Endless, but right around that time I was following this label called Mannequin Records, and I was buying a lot of their reissues and a lot of their music, and so I came across Soviet through them. Probably around like 2004, I started hearing some. I think there was a resurgence or a lot of cold wave bands were coming out, and then it sort of evolved by late 2000s into like synthwave and also dark wave and also in there was also some bands that sort of sounded like new wave and synth pop as well. There was a big 80s resurgence even before uh, things like vaporwave and those sort of took it to a even higher level. But um, the stuff that I like the most of all the waves and all the different kind of sounds that sound like their 80s of styles was dark wave and cold wave, and Soviet is a is a strong cold wave or post punk band. Um, if you don't know, you should check them out. I have a couple of their. This is one of their early EPs that I got. This is their first record that I got back in 2010 or 2011, and then this is a compilation of their first three singles from 2011 as well. I kind of lost track of them for a little bit, and getting into other styles, you can't buy everything that a band comes out with, and this was their third album, and I've been wanting to kind of get back to them and hear their second and third album because I never got a chance to, and so I figured I'd start with reviewing their third album, and eventually I'll come back to their second and their first album and review those as well. Andrea Giometti is the lead singer and also the bass player, and they have a so he does bass and vocals, and then they have a guitar player and then a drummer, and of course they're gonna get the usual comparisons to Joy Division and things like that. There's a couple differences that I find in Soviet that that are different and interesting. First, his bass playing. It's very much, and just their sound is a little bit more punk than a lot of post punk bands are, and just by a little bit, just a touch. He plays very aggressively on the bass, and it's kind of exciting. And if you hear him live, or if you see videos of them live on YouTube, like he really gets into it, and he really is really aggressive with it, and it goes great, especially live, and just different at a different level of. It's not as laid back as like some post punk can be in the rhythm section. So it's definitely got the more aggressive sort of punk and post punk sound, and it's a little bit more raw and a little bit more. I wouldn't say underground, but just a different kind of bass playing, which stands out in my opinion. The other thing that's great is his voice. It's kind of unique. There's almost some times where it doesn't sound like he's singing in English, and his voice hits certain tones, and that's really cool as well. So those are um, probably the most distinct differences between the normal post punk. I feel like the guitar is probably a little bit faster too, and it probably a little bit has a little bit more edge than a lot of post punk. Drummer's pretty standard. Um, Standard not being bad or good, but just being consistent or what you expect. I don't think there was anything that went like over the edge or different. It's solid playing, but it's really it's not probably the thing that stands out the most or is different. Although he does have some stops and starts that are good that go with the song, and but nothing really like super unique with the drummer in my opinion. But yeah, the bass is more aggressive, and his voice is kind of the main differences for me. And again, it's a little bit more on the just leaning into a little bit more of a punk style than a post punk, just by a little bit. Um, the great thing about like post punk music in general is there's certainly like a hallmark sound that all post punk bands or bands like this kind of strive to. And this certainly hits that. Soviet do a great job in capturing that sound. And then there's I think the other thing about post punk is there's a level of catchiness to it, and I think they do a good job of that as well. Um, Maybe not a fantastic job, but on the songs that I like more, they do a better job on the catchiness than some other bands. But I think they are above average when it comes to their catchiness. But um, those are two things that I look for in post punk: how vintage it sounds, how true to the original sound it is, and then some nuances and the catchiness and just the songs themselves. Those are kind of the things I look for in this style. And I think Soviet are well above average for post punk revival sound. Um, I think definitely that they go over a little bit better live than even album as well. So that's one key thing is that if you saw them live or you saw a live video of them, I think they do hit another even level, more so in their live show than even their albums. So if you like their albums, you're really gonna love them live, I think. Um, there's enough variation on this album. There's 9 songs. There's enough variation on this album to really keep it fresh through multiple listens. So that's a good thing as well. I'm going to really touch really quickly and rate the tracks, and then I'll go into maybe a little bit of the opportunities of the album, and then my overall thoughts on the album. So the first track is called Fairy Tale. Um, I give this one 6.5 stars. It's leaning on almost really kind of hitting the mark, but it doesn't quite in the as far as the catchiness. And there's a couple tracks on here that don't quite hit that level for me, and it's probably the only drawback on the album for me. The sound is there, the energy is there, the uniqueness is there, the hallmark sound is there. I just wish a few of the songs were just a little bit better and sort of getting into that more consistent 7-8 range on songs. There's a lot of tracks in the 6 and 7s in here. I wish they were more in the 7-8s, just a little bit better. And you'll tell it's easy to tell which songs I like because you'll see my scores. But Fairy Tale 6.5, solid. Endless Beauty I like a little bit less, 6.25 stars. The changes on this track are a little bit more punk than normal post punk sound, perhaps, and I'm not a huge fan of punk music. Um, I'm very kind of torn on it. Like, if you looked at my punk collection, you'll see like, you might see. I don't even know if I'd call PL punk, but you'll see some like Dead Kennedys and a little bit of UK punk, but there's some I grew up with. I guess maybe like GBH. I liked Suicidal Tendencies. I liked, of course, I like Dead Milkmen. Um, I grew up on Sex Pistols. Um, I like a little bit of the Germs. I like a little bit of the Bad Brains. I like a little bit of Circle Jerks. I like a little bit of Black Flag. I said Dead Kennedys. I don't like so much of the '90s punk, like um, or late '80s. I don't like Bad Religion. Um, some definitely don't like some of the more popular stuff like Blink 182 and stuff like that. I despise that stuff. But that's kind of where I'm at with punk. Like, and there's a few more bands in there as well. Like, I don't like Offspring or any of the Vandals or there's some other bands in the sort of early '90s and stuff like that, but there's some bands that I like throughout the '80s. I mentioned GBH. I don't like Exploited. Um, I'm trying to think of that '90s popular one, but I don't like them either. Um, but that's kind of where I'm at with punk music. So sometimes when like this one goes a little bit punk as far as some of the chord changes, I don't mind it, but I don't love it as well. So it doesn't make me like this one any less. But that's just a side note to some of their songs. Sort of have they lean a little bit into the punk chord changes, and I don't hate that, but I don't necessarily love that as well. It's just kind of like, eh, it almost verges on a little bit too poppy for me. I tend to like my post punk very consistent and sort of in the sweet spot. And if the chord changes go into a little bit punk, it kind of leans on a little bit of kind of a little poppy for me. And Endless Beauty does a little bit of that, but still a strong song. Six and a quarter stars. Remember Now, track 3 is my favorite on the album. Um, I like the two songs I like most on this album, and this is one, is this one develops the chorus better, develops the instrumental better. It's more epic. There's better changes in it. It switches it up. There's a break in it. Like this one really takes you on a trip. It's got a different edge to it. Um, Bass line's really good on this one as well. It really takes it to another level, and that's really sometimes what I look for when some of the best cold wave can kind of hit an anthemic range where it's just crescendoing and sounding great, and the chorus comes out and it rings out and it just really kind of nails it on the more epic pieces, and it really takes you on a trip. This was a verging on classic for me. This is a really great track. I love this one. I give it eight stars out of 10. This is what I'm talking about. This is exactly the type of um, uh, it reminds me of Soft Kill. If you guys have ever heard of Soft Kill, it sort of reminds me of that. Certain parts of Black Marble, which I'm a big fan of. Black Marble sounds like that. Belong. Um, Craft Spells a little bit kind of has a little bit of that, but not as punky or as fast. But that's a little bit more towards synth wave or synth pop. But great song. Remember Now. Great song. 8 out of 10 stars. Track number 4 called Going Through. This one's certainly probably the heaviest track on there with the guitars and everything like that. 6 and a quarter stars. Track number 5 is called Star. 6.5 stars. Not really anything worth mentioning. Kind of that really kind of hits home with me on that. Just solid, good post punk. Pretty straightforward. Not too much to say about it. Solid tracks, 6 and a quarter and 6.5 on track 4 and 5. Track 6, same thing, 6.5 stars. This one's a little bit more tight, a little bit more energy, kind of a wall of guitar sounds. This one has potential, but doesn't quite get there for me as far as like getting over the hump, as far as like being very good into the sevens and eights. I guess 6.5. And then my second favorite track is called Rainbow, track number 7. 7.5 stars. This adds a different, more, there's a melodic moment in there that adds another level to it. The chorus is really strong. A deeper bridge in here, around 4 minutes and 10 seconds, a little bit more melodic. The fade out's great. Um, this is what I'm talking about. This is exactly the type of post punk I like. 7.5 stars. And then track number 8, Surf a Palm. The guitar tones kind of remind me of Big Country in a strange way. There's some Big Country that's like Steel Town has some kind of crescendo guitars like this. But it's just for a second in that. I mean, obviously it's post punk versus but there's some kind of jangled guitars that kind of hit kind of this peaky kind of high pitched sound with the reverberance that kind of reminds me a little bit like some Big Country. This one's 6.25 stars, and then Blend my third favorite track on the album, 6 3/4 stars. Um, this one's really close to being even better as well. It's just all of them. I feel like I mean, there's a lot of them that I feel like are really close. Like if they just expanded on the rhythms and the melody and sort of made it a little bit more euphoric and maybe a little bit more some changes in there as far as like like Remember Now just kind of breaks down in the middle of the track and there's almost like you felt like it was going to end and then it came back. Like just some changes in there. Um, this album is it has enough variation to keep it fresh, but I just wish it had a little bit more variation to take it to another level. Um, I add up I add up the stars for the song and it's 60.5 stars divided by 9, which is a 6.72. I think that correlates to the album perfectly fine. So 67 out of 100 on the high side of good. If you're into like post punk, you're into that Joy Division sound. Check out Soviet, the album called Endless. I think you'll be surprised. I'm definitely going to review their other albums as well. I've only heard some of the songs off album one that are from here, and yeah, yeah. Actually, I'm sorry. These are the EPs. I haven't heard the first album. Yeah, these are all the EPs. That's right. I think I'm trying to remember if there's a few tracks on here that's on the first album. No, this collects the first three EPs. Yeah, so yeah, I haven't heard the first album. Just I feel like I have because I got these two. Um, but yeah, I haven't heard their first or their second album as well. So I'm looking forward to reviewing those. But curious, go Google Soviet, the track called Remember Now, and also the track Rainbow. Tell me what you think. I'll be curious um, what your thoughts are and what you think of this album. If you're into post punk, you should check out this album. I think you'll like it. So yeah, Soviet, 2016 album called Endless, 67 out of 100. Definitely a good album.
Cafe.